I've been following the lead up to Street Fighter 6 for a while now, and by far my favorite character in the game is JP, the franchise's latest villain. To say this guy is mysterious is putting it lightly, but across these past weeks, I've put together as much lore and as many references as I could find. This video will have timestamps for the different segments. We'll start with his official bio info, then get into his many references to Russian and Slavic mythology, and finally, we'll round it out with some speculation and theories. Without further ado, let's get started. Thank you for joining me on this lore deep dive. It is
an honor, to be sure.
Hailing from Russia, Johann Petrovich is an elderly man with dark skin and white hair. He is 6'3", weighs 214 pounds, and was born on May 1st. He's the head of a global NGO called the Terra Network Partners, who have a history of successful investment projects related to developing nations. As part of their work in the country of Nashal, he is currently serving as the acting policy advisor to its government. He works with a secretary named Kalima, and he also owns a cat named Sibel. He likes chess puzzles, cleaning, and local cuisines, while he dislikes stains on his clothes and sleep. He is prominently featured in the Days of the Eclipse comic series, which at the time of this script has 2 entries, and he's quickly cemented himself as the new antagonist of the franchise. With all that said, let's take a closer look at this villainous newcomer, starting with his move names. Some of his moves have their names in English: Departure, Interdiction, Malice, but Amnesia deserves a special mention. This is the name of the hacktivist group seen in the comic, who interrupt JP's announcement speech in Nashal with a deep-faked video framing Ken as a terrorist supporter, something it's implied JP himself had a hand in. Bylina is a style of Russian verbal poetry focused on telling long, embellished fictional stories of adventure and fantasy. Grom Strelka means thunder arrow in Russian. This could also be a reference to the Slavic storm god Perun, whose arrows are said to create thunder and lightning. Zilant, meaning snake, is the name of a dragon-like flying serpent in Russian legend. It's the symbol of the city of Kazan, and it features in several ancient legends relating to the city's founding, where it's almost invariably the villain. Ravina is Bulgarian for ravine, and Uragan is Russian for hurricane. Espada and Exilio are Latin for sword and exile. Triglav, meaning 3 peaks, is the most iconic mountain in Slovenia. It's featured on their coat of arms, and it's the defining feature of their only national park, which is also named after it. This is also the name of a 3-faced Slavic tribal god whose statue was said to be made of gold. A similar connection to gold is found in a legend about the mountain involving a goat with golden horns. Earth and gold, where have we seen that before? Strybog is the Slavic god of wind and wealth, depicted as an old white-haired man. Torbalan is the Bulgarian name for the sack man, or literally the man with the bag. This is a boogeyman or Krampus-like figure in the form of a well-dressed man in a hat who kidnaps children. A popular fan theory going around is that the clones summoned in this move are actually the soul of the late M. Bison himself. Considering he was a hat-wearing man who abducted the dolls, this connection could lend that theory some credence. Keep this theory in mind for later. Chornobog is the Slavic god of misfortune, darkness, and winter. His name literally means black god. You might recognize the more Western demonic interpretation of him as Chernobog in Disney's Fantasia. Now that we've looked at the more obvious references to Slavic and Russian mythology in his moves, let's take a listen to my favorite theme in the game, the Plunderer. This imposing, sinister masterpiece is defined by these bursts of harsh electric shrieking that almost sound like screams in the background. This theme could be one big reference to the staff-wielding Slavic god Yarovit, whose name is derived from the words harsh and plunder. Looking at JP himself, he has a recurring theme of duality in his design, specifically between light and dark, and it's in more places than just the contrast between his hair and skin or his love of chess. One of his shoulders is white with his hand facing the opponent, while the other is covered in a black cape with his hand behind his back. His drive impact is initially white and gold, but turns red and purple on counter hit. Even his official art has his name styled so it still says JP if you flip it upside down. I'd like to talk about that cape on his shoulder because it bears some interesting hints at his lore in the form of this strange crest. It appears on the clasp, and it's also prominently featured on the back as seen in his windscreen. So I initially thought this was a bird, but it actually resembles an insect, specifically a sphinx moth. Even the chain on his cape almost resembles one of their larvae. This is an interesting choice, to say the least, because moths play an important role in Slavic mythology, where they are known as mora. The word mora has a double meaning. It's a word for the sphinx moth, and it also refers to the souls of the living that leave their bodies while they sleep, manifesting as moths. However, in Old Slavic, mora means nightly spirit, bad dream, or simply nightmare. This is also where the word moroi comes from, which originally described a spirit of the dead returned from the grave to drain the life force of the living, but has since become synonymous with vampires and ghouls. Capcom has actually used this word before in Resident Evil Village. The enemies in Castle Dimitrescu are referred to by the feminine version of this word, moroika. Remember the theory that JP is manifesting Bison's soul with his Tourbillon move? The fact that his psycho-powered arm is covered by a cape bearing a symbol synonymous with a malevolent, life-draining spirit seems to reinforce that theory even further. As for what this means in the lore sense, it's most likely the symbol of his NGO, or maybe the Petrovich family crest, but I'm interested to see if we get any further info on it. Finally, let's get to the theories. For starters, let's talk the most iconic part of his outfit, the cane. There's nothing exceptionally strange in its design, but he obviously uses it to channel his psycho power and because he views physical combat as irrational. For me, the first character that comes to mind here is Falk. She's the only other person we've seen channeling psycho power through an object like this, and fighting with a very similar weapon, a short staff. Considering she was trained by Shadaloo, could JP have been her mentor? In her story, we hear her refer to Ed's close-range boxing style as inefficient. Perhaps this, combined with her long-range use of psycho power and her staff, were instilled in her by JP's teachings. Maybe her escape is even what prompted him to leave the organization himself, considering he clearly knows Shadaloo is gone. We know Ed is coming back, with his allegiance flag in the leaked character sheet showing he's presumably still running Neo Shadaloo, so I'll be very interested to see if we get any details on what happened to Falk. Could something bad have happened to her, leading to Ed's more rough appearance and JP's departure from Shadaloo? Or will she return as DLC at a later time to shed more light on things? Let me know your thoughts on this. Lastly, I'd like to share my personal theory on JP's motives and story. I believe he is working with Gil, or at the very least attempting to follow in his footsteps. The Nashal Arena is decorated in his colors. We've seen hints to the idea that Gil is actively influencing society during the events of the game, and then there's this. JP refers to the Nashal Arena as a restored shrine, and I think it's one place in particular, the stage Sun Chase Moon from Street Fighter V. If you look at the arena, it almost looks like the valley has been flooded, with only the lower level of the tower visible. Even these broken columns surrounding the arena are similar. We know that the tower in that stage lights up after a round, as if it's absorbing energy from defeated fighters to further Gil's ambiguous plans. This would line up with why JP is insisting on holding a tournament here. For further evidence pointing to his connection with Gil, I want to look at his form of psycho power, because it's unlike anything else we've seen from other users of it in the past. Most psycho power takes the form of fiery energy, but JP's is the opposite. It looks like ice. We know Gil was able to give Colleen her control over ice. Maybe this is what happens when a psycho power wielder gains cryokinesis as well. It's worth pointing out that in JP's first appearance in the comic, he hands Ken a blue cloth, which is said to be a gift from the gods. Could this be alluding to Gil gifting JP with his own blue powers of ice manipulation? Finally, I think that JP's goal with Nashal is to unite people in one area, so that, once the arena has completed whatever ritual was planned for the Sun Chase Moon Temple, those people can presumably either enter Gil's harmonious gate, or be part of whatever other vision he'd had for the place. He seems intent on separating Kent from his son Mel, who he could be planning to kidnap. When you consider he could be stealing people from various parts of the world for some unknown, malicious reason, the title of his theme makes a lot of sense. The Plunderer. Those are my theories and observations on JP in Street Fighter VI so far. He's a very interesting, very engaging villain who I think has a lot of potential to be just as iconic as any of the villains we've had before. His design is great, his theme is great, and his playstyle looks like it'll be fun to master, so I can't wait to play him. I hope you enjoyed this lore breakdown, because I had a blast making it. If you want to see more videos covering gaming, Warhammer, and more in the future, please consider supporting me by liking and sharing this video, and subscribing so you don't miss any future uploads. Thank you very much for watching.